Hello, my name is Shinay Tredeau, and I'm here once again with Bhavani Maki. We're back for another conversation. Thank you to our listeners for taking the time out of your day to tune into these podcasts. We deeply appreciate all of you. Truly, in this age of oversaturation of information, we hope these particular conversations bring you space to contemplate what truly matters to you. Bhavani, I'm so excited to be here with you again and see your gorgeous face.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's special for me.
It's special for me too. Thank you.
I have some hard questions today. I want to know what is inspiring you right now in yoga and structural integration. What is lighting you up? What is on your heart?
Yes. So, as you know, I am a student and I keep learning and keep growing. And part of that is my students encourage me to do that. And so always like having a deepened understanding. Plus, it also just feeds my own fire. And it's a commitment I made to my teacher to keep learning. So I have been studying embryological development, which has been really, really fascinating. And I think that like yoga has been a little bit in a vacuum. So of course I'm really curious more about organic functionality, less than the form, and understanding how layers develop, how we form. Something that is taught in the structural integration community, I've heard it iterated many times, but it didn't really land, is that we're all still embryos. And on a very basic level, it's true because of the original structures that just keep on through autophagy, they keep folding in on themselves and consuming themselves and becoming something new. And just like in our own lives, we have so many spheres and so many layers to our psyche and our being. We'll experience spurts in some areas of our life, and other areas kind of haven't really fully emerged. So I'm really curious about this emergent process. And right now I am learning about the retinaculae. There's
What
seven.
is that?
Yeah, exactly. What is that? I mean, it's not like it's where there's these layers of fascia, but they're consistent with everybody. And there's seven of them, and it forms kind of like a band. So for instance, you have one around your ankle, and it keeps all those extensors and flexors from popping off of your ankle. So it's kind of like a band. Remember when we used to, I don't know, it was kind of hip in the 80s when you went cycling, you put like an elastic band
Yeah.
around your pant leg so it wouldn't get caught in the gears. And we have different ones within our body. And then um, understanding like the psychosomatic influences, and then also how they affect our structure, which then affects for women the way that we carry babies, which then gives them an imprint when they're born. And then all of the things that we do to babies out of coming from a good space, swinging them by their arms, when they're learning to walk, when you assist them prematurely and you hold them under the armpits or you hold them by their hands already, because walking is kind of like a falling forward motion, and it's all part of developing the curves of the spine. So when a child learns to walk, instead of falling forward, their tendency is to contract in the back because they'd
Mm.
rather fall on their butts. So when you're guiding children, it also causes them to like wrench their back muscles more.
Mm.
So I'm so fascinated by this and how these retinaculae, they're also at the major nerve plexes, where the spine kind of changes its orientation, whether it's a concavity or a convexity. and they affect the endocrine glands. So I never really loved studying anatomy. It just, I don't know, it just didn't really speak to my heart. I was more interested in the physiology, but in this context of functionality and understanding what's happening in so many bodies and touching bodies more in a different way, it's coming to life for me a lot more. So that's what I'm really curious about. And the past, I would say 2.5, 3 years has been me really pulling back, as you know, where I'm exploring more intrinsic movement through as a response to sensation. I mean, that's how we organically move. But then we get these archetypes of what things should look like. And there's a lot of dysmorphia involved in that, where, oh, I don't look right, or we're like, oh, this part of me isn't. So we get into all kinds of trouble. And there's a lot of, we talked about it the other day in the Sūtra mentorship. It's a lot harder to unlearn, and that slowing down process. So after like 2.5, 3 years of really slowing down, like, how do I even rest on all fours?
Mm.
Like, what's really going on there? Where am I efforting? Where, and even the psycho babble process of, oh, it should be more like this or like that is really, this has been such a great part of the Vibhuti Pada, hasn't it too?
Yeah.
Like the little anu infinitesimal shifts that happen kshana in a quarter of a twinkle of an eye are big moments. Like it's like Hatha yoga, right? Anu, shasa. Like when you're penetrated by those moments, it's like, I am an embryo, and I'm continuing to emerge, and I'm continuing to extend myself out into the world as a way of experiencing my core self. It's just resonating so deeply on psychosomatic, psychospiritual layers, and how it's iterated in the sutra. Um, it's kind of like all these guidelines that have been there, they're starting to flesh out into a much bigger mandala of life. So that's been really exciting for me. And what's really cool is, like, Nico, he had his first day of school yesterday, and it's pretty rigorous PE program, and they had to do quite a bit of running, and then they stretched, and he came home with a sore back. And I'm just like, oh my God, what's the quality of stretching? Like, I can just imagine all these little kids bouncing to touch their toes, completely like pushing their lumbars back, um, and he was like, oh, my leg hurts, can you help me? And it's like, now I have a way in a couple of minutes. He's so pliable and he trusts me,
Mm.
so he knows that it works. So I'm like, on a practical level, I can give him triage, basically. And he's gotten really good at seeing bodies. So it's so interesting because he, in our last session, he grew an inch.
Wow.
So this is where, like, where the body packs on layers is the body's attempt to kind of like create stays. And then when you start to unwind those tensions, there's all this length and span that's caught up in these areas. And, he went to school and he was like, no one's really grown. I'm like one of the tallest kids. And I was like, it's so sad, but I look at a lot of these kids and they look like they're shrink wrapped.
Mm-hmm.
Like their bones are going so fast, and then the layers, they can't move. And, and it was just like, what a gift to have this. So that's where I'm going. And, more people are kind of coming to me and getting some education in this. And I'm excited about it. And in my next training, I'm going to be, it's totally different than any other training. Like none of the trainings are really the same. And we're really going to be exploring this embryological development because it helps us to understand how we're moving and diversification and discrete um, aspects of the structure. So anyway, now I'm like starting to actually, do some yoga asanas more and more. And after having gone to like a really slow pace, because I need to feel these glacial movements on, if you're moving quick and unlearn. And so it's been really exciting to it's like, wow, this feels integrated, like I'm integrating it on another level. So it's new, but it's been 3 years, and it's less of a thinking process and it's more like, oh yeah, I can kind of like feel this. And it takes so much less effort. It actually frees up a lot of energy and it's juicy. Um, but I'm doing less, but there's so much more. Yeah. So my benchmarks have changed.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's so exciting. There was so many things I just got caught up in listening to you that I wanted to talk about. But one of them being I had a similar experience when you were helping me with my son's legs. Luca, he just turned 1 last week, and he was born very bow-legged and like kind of like his grandpa. But you were helping me do some like baby massage, and I was looking at all these babies in my mom's and babies group just the other day, and I was like, wow, I feel the same way about these little babies as Nico did about the kids in his class. Like I feel like they're just shrink wrapped, like their bones are growing, but they just needed some I don't want to call it massage. I don't know, that brings up a different kind of thing, but what would you call it? Some structural integration?
You know, it doesn't have to be rocket science. It can
Yeah.
just be like feeling like, oh wow,
Yeah.
these things are all adhered together. And the cool thing probably about Luca is that he's moving even though you're holding him. So that's kind of the thing is like you hold things, you kind of put them where they want to go, but then people move the bones and then they start to, it's like peeling off a wetsuit,
Mm.
or when the layers adhere, it becomes like a shin guard. I know some of the people are not viewing this, but I want to share this because I just saw this picture the other day. I'm going to share it with you. This is Nico's leg when he was born.
Oh, wow.
Like, so for those of you who can't see, his toes are touching the front of his shin, and his shin is completely touching his thigh, and his heel is completely like, talk about completely like how the way that we're folded in
Yes.
utero, and even whether our head's to one side or our head is between our knees, these create characteristic rotations in our spine and in our body that then are who we are. So here's the thing, it's part of our imprint and it's not necessarily a bad thing. So all these ideas of symmetry, I mean, I know you know this and many people know this, but again, it's like um they're just ideas. Nature is not symmetrical and it's about functionality. There's people who have severe scoliosis that are actually have a really good functionality to them.
Yeah.
So it's like we tend to have pretty narrow ideals, and it's so nice to be able to marvel in the complexity of nature and in the many ways that she unfolds. Yeah.
It's so exciting. I remembered what I was going to say. It seems like to me, we've been exploring the third chapter of Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And the more I study these sutra with you, it's been 10 years. It's been 10 years. And I know it's a milestone. It's like, it's so magical, but it's so practical in the way that I feel like it's describing the human experience from birth to death and all of these unfolding moments, these growth moments. And I just really appreciate how you're exploring this third chapter that seems to be about magical powers, but really it's just so um, ordinary in a sense that it's just the deeper layers and the deeper levels. And we were talking about past lives, and I was considering to myself, I was like, oh, I'm one of those people. I don't really have magical or mystical experiences. I don't really have dreams. I can count the number of, dreams, kind of magical dreams I've had on one hand, which is like two. Um, but last night I had a dream about a past life, and I was sure that it was that because there were other kind of signs throughout my whole life that I had had senses of this. And I was like, wow, it is real. It can be real. And like you were saying, the way our mother carries us in utero also forms how we move about in the world. And I just think that's so cool. And it's not all bad. I think there are really useful elements.
So great.
Yeah.
I love that like Sutra opened something in you to receive that insight. Like talk about right on time. How cool. Did you write it down?
I did. I did write it down.
Well, I can't wait to hear about it another
Yes.
time.
I'll tell you, you all will just have to come to the Sutra mentorship.
That's it.
So there's so much we could go into, and maybe we will after this. But I'm also really interested in what is troubling you in the world of yoga and or structural integration. What's niggling at you? So not necessarily in the world writ large, because there's a lot, but more in the domain of your own practice and insights and your discovery on the path of yoga and life.
Oh, you're really going to get me into trouble here. I'm going to
Oh,
blame
good.
it on you.
Please do.
Well, it's been a really interesting thing. I mean, I'm a newcomer in the structural integration world, and it's definitely has its own culture as yoga does. And where yoga tends to be really warm and fuzzy, and quite honestly, most of the time, saccharine sweet, um, the SI community is almost a little bit different. It's I think it takes time maybe for people to warm up, and also there's a real focus on like this topic where yoga can be so vast, yoga is everything. So that's been interesting. And there's been a lot of struggles in that community as far as um, and Dr. Rolf said this, that once she died, that it was just going to be like, you know, a mess as far as people trying to um, wrangle control of the dynasty or the school. So sadly, there's been infighting and backbiting, kind of like in yoga too,
I would say with every tradition that had a master at its helm, every time the master dies, kind of gets a little messy.
It can,
It can.
if it most of the time, but if they do a good job, it's about the teachings at the center.
Yeah.
That being said, the guild who I was studying with, they really, from what I can see, their efforts have been to try to create a program where you don't have the institute is separate from the guild, and they're bringing in teachers from all modalities to give less of a strict, stringent modality. And I really appreciate the spirit with which they're doing that. Yoga is like, the Wild West. It's a freak show. I I don't recognize it very much. I mean, I think, it's like um, I see my old yoga shala, and I'm really happy that it's thriving. I think maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 30% of the classes are actually yoga. Most of it's like fitness and muscle building and whatever, So I think that, in a small community, people have to diversify. Um, I I don't really see much attention on the cosmological aspect other than like maybe throwing a sutra here or there. It's still new community, so they're developing. And I don't have my finger on the pulse of like how many yoga students or studios or teachers, so I don't really know. Um, but I also, and this is something I really been appreciating that's been so emphasized in the Vibhuti Pada is appreciating that like these moments of development, and just because of where I am doesn't mean it's right for other people to be where I
Mm,
am, and
mm,
where I am from yoga is really different in some ways because like you, I'm in touch with the indigenous roots. It was an indigenous tradition, it was a really fringe kind of a thing. And I studied in India. So um it was connected to the land, it was connected to the culture and a different way of seeing. And I also have roots, my father's side, the Greeks are very Eastern in kind of like their perspective or the way that they see things or move. It's even though it's foundation of the West and democracy and whatnot, it's a very Eastern culture. So that didn't feel like such a far reach for me. But as I've said before, what troubles me is the industry aspect,
mm,
um, where it just feels it's so tied into the crippling economy right now, the tariffs that are being exacted, the Gulf of America making Canada the 51st American state, just this whole like there's just so much distortion happening and that, people who aren't, you know, glitterati or already, financially abundant are just trying to make ends meet. And so, you have to kind of like cater to what's going to pay the bills. But it just seems like more and more there's like a emphasis on the artifice as opposed
mm,
to the art.
mm,
Now that being said, I've also been around enough to know that like it's a process and it's a progression. And I do have a deep instinctual trust that things are evolving. Even like
mhm.
when even in my own process of healing, sometimes things got really worse before they could get better, you know? There were
Yeah.
healing crises. So um I'm just kind of like holding the long view for that.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, it's a bit troubling that people so want to hang on to what they're good at or what's familiar, which could even be like um chasing what they're not good at and what is kind of like unrealistic or just some kind of like an athletic demonstration. Patanjali says our greatest challenge is that we're constantly missing the point. But when you can lean into that, that's a great place to be. We
Mm,
put a lot of importance on certainty, but certainty blocks, the creative aspect.
mhm.
Yeah. So that's a good title, from artifice to art. From art to
Yes.
artifice.
Love it. You said in the beginning, um, really in the beginning, I'm trying to remember the word that you used, but sometimes yoga kind of reaches a plateau or it's kind of in a little bit of a bubble. And that's where you're really loving bringing in this new material for structural integration and the embryology. And I love that too. I've been studying a little bit with Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen online, and she talks a lot about embryology, and I just love it. I like rewatched these videos over and over because they're so subtle, and this work is so deep. And a lot of what your work is right now, it's reminding me of her teaching style, is that we're not like doing a whole lot in that, it's like we're not, kicking out these poses over and over and over again. But even when I started studying with you 10 years ago, we were not doing that. So I feel like I I didn't have that model, or that model that you were using for so long. I've only heard stories. But I really appreciate the deep and subtle work of this, and bringing in these other elements because, like you were saying, sometimes in the yoga world, and it can get a little stale. I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact word you used, but to bring in these other elements and start to get more into the art of the thing and to remember the indigenous tradition. And I love that you brought up that the context of yoga is the land. It is the East. And then I thought about like the branches of the tree of yoga moving into the West, but its roots are still in the East, embedded in the land.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was like, wow, Hawaii is kind of like the eastest part of the West.
Mhm. Yeah.
And, I think maybe it's because in the East they've retained there's more intact transmission. So it's not to say that the East is better, but there's kind of the rituals are maybe still held more.
Hmm.
And that was actually an interesting thing. I know you had to cut out early yesterday on the Sūtra thing, but when we went into the group discussion, was like looking, a lot of it is in that Sūtra about understanding who we are and where we come from and where we're going. And then even extending that to others is looking our conditioning square at its square, like really seeing it. What was I going to say about that? Oh yeah, that there's like, your indigenous roots are not synonymous with religion,
Right.
so even understanding that, and a lot of people's religions changed because of who was in power and what gave you the most opportunity, or for persecution, or like, oh yeah, let's add another god to the pantheon. Who's this guy, JC? We got room for another one, so being able to go deeper, and because there's that animist tradition that's still much more alive in the East, and we seem to, people are so disconnected. Part of it is the luxury, I mean, that's something that I really, when I was staying in Tucson and it was 108 degrees at like 5 p.m. And I was amazed because I went outside, nobody could be outside. I mean, probably the original peoples can, they know they know how to build buildings and such. But I would just go outside, and all I could hear was the heavy whir and machinery of air conditioners.
Mhm.
So, like, I mean, we were even talking about it yesterday because this house, we didn't put insulation in the ceiling. It wasn't required in Hawaii. Now we're building another building and it's required in the roofs. And I was like, oh, it feels cooler in the new structure than here. And Ray explained to me, yeah, because it's getting hotter. So now
Yeah.
it's required. So, like, how much we're just kind of living in our climate controlled bubbles. And even, the echo chambers of where, instead of having interactions in community, it's like online communities or social media communities. There's much less of kind of like the melange of interaction. Yeah. So with that luxury and the progression of civilized cultures, um, there's also a loss, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me because what you were saying earlier, the whole thread of what remains are the teachings. For something to be true, it has to withstand this test of time. So it has to be remain true throughout all time. And that's why I really resonate with the the Patanjali Yoga Sutra because it still holds true for me. And it's true because it's transmitted in a way that has life and juice, and we're doing it with each other and and in a group, and then we get to see each other twice a year or once a year or whenever we come together, and it feels very alive for me. And I wonder if that's part of what sticks. And I'm curious, have you had contact with a um like a oh, what it's because it's not only a spiritual community, but any kind of community where there's a kind of a master orchestrator, even like Ida Rolf, and then when they die, that there's a healthy transition and the teachings remain. Have you ever had contact or been a part of something like that?
You mean outside of yoga or?
Yeah, anywhere. I wanted to hold it loosely.
I mean, I would say, yeah, even for instance, like the Farmers
Yeah,
Association,
yeah.
it's like, my husband was president of the Kauai Farmers Association and vice president of the state, and then he eventually kind of like it was time to pass it on. It's like you do for 10, 15 years, and then it's time to pass it on for the people who have the juice and you want to spend time with your kid while they're little. Um, but it was like such a great model because on this little island of Kauai where it's hard to get anybody to really show up for anything, there could be 50, 60 people at these meetings, and everybody would bring a potluck dish from something that was growing in their garden. And they would bring in different speakers and share different experiences. And it was more of a like a hive where there was cross pollination and
Mm.
sharing. So it's like, yeah, I think it exists on a lot of levels. Um, maybe because it's less formalized as there's some guru or some
Hmm.
um canonical teachings, and it's rooted in the land and working with the land. And boy, is she unpredictable. You never know what's going on, which way things are going to roll or turn, or what kind of weather you're going to have. That there's kind of like a dynamicism that's inherent to it. So I think there are all kinds of wonderful communities and dream circles and things like that exist. I mean, in some ways, I've really pared down my existence. I'm not going to those things as much because I'm writing a book. I'm studying and learning, and you know how it is. It's like
Yeah.
time is incredibly precious when you're a parent.
Yes. Yes, those 45-minute naps, man.
Oh my gosh.
That's
Did
really,
that address what you were asking?
yeah, that was actually perfect. I really feel that about farming in general. Even just, I'm growing tomatoes in pots outside on my porch. But that connection to the land, and I really love the language of cross-pollination because really that's the only way that plants survive. But I would say humans also is we don't exist in a bubble or a vacuum. And I know for myself, I absolutely need outside input, and I'm very much on my best behavior when there's other people around. But I really feel like it draws out the best in me.
And we all need in that cross-pollination, like, what's the buzz? We need that. We want to have a buzz within ourselves. And
Yeah.
so that's super exciting. And definitely I've experienced that within my community of astrologers that I've been having conversations with for over 30 years, because it's
Mm,
just like there's so many perspectives, as even though like in the I had this one uh reading from, oh come on, why can't I, Chakrapani, who
mm,
is a very famous astrologer, and he
mm.
sat with me and he literally recited, like we would learn the sutra by heart. He recited the aspects in my chart, basically.
Wow.
um but like, unless you have like that really traditional, and even those traditional ones, I think it's like, then they go into deeper conversations, because it's a complexity, right? It's like there's this, but there's that. It's like the body, where it's such a buzz now to fixate on the psoas. Just working on the psoas is a band-aid. There's so many more things that are at play. So when you're looking at all of these tensions and all of these, how it forms the structure, and then even this idea that tension is a bad thing.
Mm,
No,
mm.
it's not. It's like what it's what keeps things growing and forming, and we want to have resilience and a comfortable amount of tension. But those kinds of conversations, it's like, wow, even hearing different words or looking at it this way, it's exciting, because the more we're seeing things, that's what Patanjali says is nirodha, right? That we're seeing things from multiple perspectives, and that we're willing to look at something without over identifying with another's point of view. Um, these are actually the coming sutras, so I don't want to spoil it, but we're learning about the affect or the presentation, which gives us more greater understanding of ourselves. And when we have a greater understanding of ourselves, we have a greater understanding of another. So it's like that embryonic, we're embryos. We just keep folding in and out of ourselves. And there's just so many things that we've never seen before that are emerging. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so exciting. There's more. I mean, I have so many questions, but I'm going to leave it at that today because I think that's a really wonderful place to end. And
Okay.
yeah, that there's just so many things to explore. Do you want me to ask you one more?
I think so. I
Okay.
think we could do one more. You were
Okay.
asking, you had to go on.
Okay. Okay, so I'll ask you one more. In one of your recent Sutra mentorship classes, you mentioned that throughout your life you had stored a lot of fear in your body, and you've told the story a couple of times of that. When you were sweating, you could actually smell the fear come through your pores. And recently, you'd been feeling like that contraction of fear had finally shifted. And I'm wondering if you can speak more about how you came to this and what shifted for you.
Yeah. So, well, as much as we want to pinpoint it to one thing, it's like that sense of seeing the whole krama. Remember that sutra? There's a whole progression that's happening, and you're able to be like, oh, wow, like I can see how that led to this and this led to that. And this was a preparation for this, and I wasn't ready for that. And now I'm ready for this. And we can kind of see it in the past a lot more by feeling where we are in the present. And then it gives us a sense of our own becoming and our own emerging. Um, but like doing this, just really doing this very, very nuanced exploration of segmentation of my spine has really been a big thing because my spine has been incredibly rigid. Unbeknownst to me, I broke my back at 19 in that car accident. They didn't tell me when they took x-rays. So I was like, what's wrong with me? Why won't my back bend? I had a lot of trauma. I was like strangled during my childhood. So there was a lot of neck stuff. I was like on the road chasing the Grateful Dead, rolled the car a couple of times. Like there was just like so much stuff in my body. And so I remember actually thinking like, you know what? Because I had no lumbar curve.
Mm.
And I had a younger teacher who was like, you have no lumbar curve. It was like, oh my God, you're so damaged and there's something so wrong with you. And it was one of those like injuries from a teacher, right?
Mm.
And I was like, oh God, I'm broken, I'm backwards, and all I want is a lumbar curve. And if I could just, and then finally I was like, you know what? Fuck this. Maybe I will never have one. I'm tired of torturing myself over this. And I like totally let it go. And then interestingly enough, like in the SI trainings, you also receive the work. And I had different input from a teacher who works in a completely like revolutionary way. It's not heavy-handed at all. And he looks
Mm.
at things completely opposite of what
Mm.
many do. Um, even within that community, like he stood it on its head and turned it inside out. And um, he, I left with a lumbar curve, like with the nascent beginnings. And part of that was probably all the segmentation I had done and the psychotherapy and whatnot. But then there's just been moments where um, something will shift. Like the other day, all of a sudden, my ass, it felt like it fell 6 inches. I realized my ass had been in my ears and I had no idea. It was kind of like there was like a halter or something, and it just went boom. And I was like,
Wow.
oh my God, or all of a sudden something will move. Like it's not even when I'm trying to do things, but it's like the undoing and the unlearning then sets up, then maybe I have a different tonicity in my body. I don't really know. It's mysterious and I don't have to know, but it's so fantastic because all of a sudden something will release. And then I'll realize, like, oh my God, I've been like holding so much tension in my head, in my
Mm.
hyoid, which is like the 12th rib. It's like so many things are determined by that, or my sphenoid bone. And I'm just like, oh my God, I didn't even realize that I was holding these areas. And it's so illuminating. It's like, just imagine if you've been in a corset your whole life and you didn't know any different, and
Mm.
suddenly it's off and you're like, oh my God, so um there's there's like a real joy, and I'm not chasing a perfection anymore. Like
Mm.
I'm just so
Mm.
excited for having these openings in my experience. And then sometimes I'm like, oh shit, then you want to hang on to it, right? Which just makes another problem.
Yeah.
So I'm having so much discovery within myself. Um, and it just keeps going deeper and deeper and more profound. And I really feel it changing the tone of my whole, um, like the undertone of my being, the
Mm.
resonance of my being. And I've also noticed it in the household, that there's just a different kind of, and we've done a lot of work, we've done a
Mm.
lot of work in my family. There's been a lot of recovery and therapy and, ceremony and just going through the fire. Um, but just really like seeing it come into fruition. Uh, It's amazing. It's amazing to feel the evolution of my own nervous system. And also, a lot of that has been, it takes time to recognize, oh, wow, there's phases in life. Like,
Mm,
oh, wow, you know what? This would be a better thing for me to do. And learning how to schedule things where before it was like, I could just do so much and get so much done. But I think I was in a highly like a cortisol infused
mm,
state. Now there's a kind of a spaciousness in
mhm,
the way there's less of an urgency. And I think
mm,
that urgency allows for the emergent to reveal. So that's pretty exciting. And I'm really appreciating the growth that's occurring and that's occurred less than like constantly like yeah, yoga raises the bar, but it needs to be um it's not meant to be coming from a place of not being enough. It's like, okay, now, like, did you know you could do this?
mm,
Have you explored this? Did you know that when you were doing that, this was happening? Like it's just creating a cascade. So I think that within and like both physically, spiritually, and emotionally, I'd created this scaffolding within myself, which in some ways was helpful, but in other ways it created a discontinuity. So I'm kind of starting to feel into this larger web of of so hard to put into words. Again, that larger mandala, there's a mandala happening, and it's really great, and it's good timing too, because Nico, he's 12. He just went back to school yesterday. He came home, he was like grumpy, and he was just like, I'm so tired, I'm so tired. And I was like, well, tell me, and he was like, oh, and he said, it's just so noisy, everybody has so much
mm,
to say. And I said, you mean the teachers? And he goes, just everybody.
mm,
And I was like, you know what? Give yourself some grace. Like it's a lot and the expectations are high and you've set high expectations for yourself and you've spent a lot of like he's really one of those, we're that kind of family. We're pretty quiet. We need time to decompress, and so going into a school situation, like there's so much information, it's such an overwhelm. And being able to share that with him, like, you got this. And yeah, you are overwhelmed, and rightly so. And that's okay. And you know what have you learned? How can you take care of your own body?
mm,
So I think like maybe when it comes down to it, I'm less likely to pathologize my
mm,
experience. And that's
mm,
something that really came alive for me in this Vibhuti Pada. Like it gets ugly sometimes. It gets uncomfortable sometimes. And don't worry about it.
yeah.
It's a passing phase. It will, this too shall pass.
Mm.
I mean, and you don't have to bypass it. You don't have to pathologize it. Not every birth is orgasmic. That's a good joke, right? I'm like, really? I guess so. Some people, I guess
Good for
depends on
you.
what, knocks your socks off or whatever. The world,
Maybe in hindsight, I don't know.
no, like, yeah, way back when. And interestingly enough, speaking about that, this is a whole other topic, which we don't even have to go there, but I learned from an old student of mine whose daughter just gave birth. And he was talking to her and she shared, she's like in her later 20s. She was like, I've never had an orgasm. And neither have a lot of my friends, that apparently this is kind of the new normal for a lot of people.
Mm.
So, how interesting. Maybe the precursor to that was that like orgasm was the bar you were reaching for, or it should be this way. I don't know. But it's just really interesting to me. And it's kind of like that problem fixation. We don't have to pathologize everything,
Yeah.
you know? Um, we can hold it within a healthy container of our resilience. And we don't have to wait for catastrophe to discover that inner strength.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, I'm glad
Yeah.
to. Great question, Shinay.
Thank
And
you.
please, everybody, help Shinay out because it's not an easy job to be nursing and coming up with great questions. She's doing a good job, but we're gonna lean into the community here. Uh,
Yeah. Send me
yeah,
an email, send Bhavani an email. We'll
yeah.
get
Let
it.
us know.
Yeah.
What, and they don't have to be great questions. It's like what intrigues you because that's exciting for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Till next time.
Ahui ho.